Hello, and welcome back to part 3 of climbing the puzzle streak ladder. Today we're starting where we left off at 11:52, and let's try and get 1300 today. In any case, we'll be doing at least 5 of them. So in this first one, I noticed that White's already in quite a bit of trouble. We're in a pin right now, and this knight is a goner next move if Black gets the chance. And from there onwards, if Black does manage to win this night, I don't see us surviving for much longer. So that immediately gives me the clue that it has to be something immediate, maybe a mating net of some sort. Really, the only checks that make sense to me are rook takes on f5, that is, the rook on g takes f5, or the rook on f takes f5. Out of these two options, I much prefer the f rook taking because we need this rook to stay on the g line to cut the king off. So immediately I look at rook takes f5, and I believe the only move for the king is to go to e7. From there, we can play either rook to g7 check or rook to f7 check. Out of those options, I think I do prefer um the rook on g moving forward because um this rook on the f file can perhaps make an appearance on this sixth rank later on in the tactic. Um, After rook to g7, if black goes to d6, I believe rook to f6 check, and black isn't going to have anywhere to move this king. He's going to have to block with queen or the rook, um, after which we can just take and win material back. Um, if he goes to d8, I believe we can go knight to f7 check and followed by rook to d5 check. That must be the answer. So rook takes f5 check, I believe, leads to checkmate in two different ways, depending on whether the king goes to d6 or whether he goes to d8. To avoid it, I guess he might have to give up queen, after which we can take back the other rook. Try that out. Okay, this one's an endgame puzzle, the first that we've seen in this current streak. Um, the common rule for endgames is that passed pawns should be pushed. They're the strongest asset in any endgame, and the king's position in the endgame becomes paramount in helping guide the passed pawn to its destination. So, for black, immediately I see that passed pawn is the e5 pawn, and for white, its equivalent would be the pawn on h3. Um, there's one thing that I notice. Um, this knight is in good position to help usher the black pawn forward. Whe- Whereas for white, his king is kind of offside as well as his knight, and our king actually has greater access and greater potential to stop the advance of this h3 pawn. There's really no other move here that makes sense. Moving the knight is just a waste of time, and our king is already okay where it is. An important thing you should consider in a pawn endgame is the concept of the box. So how it works is we draw the diagonal to the end of the board and we kind of create this box situation. And if our king is in the box of this pass pawn on h3, it's easy to stop it. This isn't something that I strictly follow. Um, I can just tell that the black king is close enough to catch this pawn, but it might be helpful for you starting out. So let's go ahead and push our pawn. So I presume he's moving the knight so we can move it to d2, but our pawn marches quickly forward and we can play it again and we're ready to queen the next move. After which knight takes and our knight can recapture back and we would just be up a piece. So this one, let's see. Okay, our queen's currently under attack. So this knight is in a pretty good position because it's forking these two rooks. We can't immediately take one of the rooks though, because our queen's actually under attack as of right now. So there's really no good checks here. It's not something I would consider. And looking at the captures, we already know that the knight taking the rook is bad because our queen's under attack. So we can take their queen first, and after the rook captures, we can capture the rook in the corner. So there we go. Okay, this one looks fairly complicated. There's a lot of firepower coming down towards our king, along with his bishop as well. But their king is in a really awkward spot. What we need to do is we need to kind of open lines so this queen can see. Right now it's kind of hemmed in between these pawns. So just looking immediately at this position, I just know that the first move has to be some sort of a check because if we don't play any check, that's gonna give White enough time to blow up an attack of his own. So really the only reasonable check in this position is pawn takes b4. May consider this move, but obviously we can just take. So let's play that, and our queen is now able to see, and it just so happens that um we can play the most obvious check, a5. The king only has one square after that, and I believe queen to c5 is checkmate. So that's a mate in two that we just calculated. I don't really see a mate in one here, so we don't really have to go ahead any further. We can just play that. Okay, this one, um, the first thing I notice, like, thing that stands out the most to me about this position is this nice open edge file. Um, the second thing I notice is that the queen could actually land here on the h2 square if this knight was not in the way. So in that sense, the puzzle kind of solves itself. All we have to do is we have to look for the most forcing move. The logic behind it is if we give white enough time to react, say for example, playing knight g6, this gives white more than enough time to react with g3, blocking the queen's entrance. So the entire point is we start with a forcing move, giving up the knight with check, and then we play the checkmate. So we've reached 1284 on the 10th puzzle, and I'll see you guys next time.